Hello everyone, it's Tony. Now, I was watching some of the footage that Eric brought back from Nuremberg this year, and I was a little dismayed to see that Foothills by Ben Bateson and myself only got a very cursory overview, because the guys that actually have been working with us on putting all of Foothills into production weren't actually around at the show to give the explanation. So consequently, it was a little bit oversimplified and didn't really, to my taste anyway, give a decent impression of the game. Certainly the bit of the game that's the standout mechanic. So what I'm going to do is just give you a quick overview. I won't take up too much of your time, so I'll just talk about the components. So firstly, in that bag, you don't get a bag like that, but that's because I got a few spare around the house. That's got the resources in it. It's got your familiar stone, iron ore, and the event cubes, of course. So there's some of those. There's the stockyard itself. It doesn't quite work the way that it does in Snowdonia. It starts with 6 items in. Only ever gets refilled from the bag when there are 0 items on it. Then it gets refilled back to 6. So it can stay there with 6 things on, but it tends not to sort of grow and grow like it would do in Snowdonia. Here's the chairman's garden. This is the spare rubble. Now in this setup I've got 6 railway lines, but they don't eat up a huge amount of the rubble, so there's quite a lot of spare. If we get a couple of the longer lines in play, then there's very little rubble left. But during the game, when the players have all finished digging away the rubble, they can get extra rubble if they need it by digging the chairman's garden. We've also got the railway lines going horizontal here across the table. You can see got a start station, and all the start stations have a particular bonus that you can get from putting your surveyor there, and I'll tell you about him in a minute. They all got different tickets as well. They all have the same ticket for their particular line. Tickets are important because some of the abilities and actions you can take can only apply to railway lines for which you have tickets. Tickets, of course, can score you points at the end of the game if you've got sets of them. There's 2, 1 each. You can never have more than one of a particular ticket. Taking a close look at the cards here, you can see we've got track, which is currently covered in rubble. These proper, real English pennies are victory points. They're, of course, my prototype, only the best for Uncle Tony, so I'm using real pennies that are cleaned myself. Building spaces that you pay the costs in. This is all familiar kind of Snowdonia stuff, and then there's the surveyor action at the end. So when you build in this space, you get to do this surveyor action. In this case, it's you can spend 1 iron ore up to twice to lay a piece of track. So that's 2 track if you've got 2 ore. Some of them give you bonuses like passengers. That's what this pink icon means. And there are pink cubes, which are your passenger resources. So this is all pretty much of a muchness, really. These are the standard kind of things. If you've played Snowdonia, you'll be familiar with the sorts of things that happen. The surveyor bonuses are new. They're sort of jump-on actions that you can get by building. You can also go there with your surveyor by taking a plain old ordinary surveyor action if you like, but it's much more fun to do several things at once. Over here we have some of the workers. So when the game event happens and it completes a station, it'll do it down the table starting from here. They build in stations that players haven't built in yet. So while we're doing stuff, these independent workers will do their own stuff somewhere else that we haven't started yet. But the heart of the game, let's look at my player tableau. I'm player blue. I have a number of these tokens. These are double-sided chits. On one side we have a building marker, so this is a blue building marker. When I build in a blue building space, I'll put that on there, get the bonus if there is one, and I'll show that I've built in that particular space. I can't obviously build if there's rubble there. That has to have been cleared first. On the other side is a victory point token for laying track. So had I laid the track in Llanbadarn, I put it on there. That's a blue railway track that's worth a point for me at the end of the game. Even more if I can get bonus cards that give me extra points for those. So I've got a few of those. There's my surveyor. He always starts at my home station. This little marker is a counter for how many building spaces I've built, because I can only score a number of cards up to the number of building spaces I've built. So if I've built 4 building spaces, I can cash away 4 cards by the end of the game. If I don't do any building, then I can't cash any cards away, and that's quite a lot of points I could be missing out on. So there's a little marker there. So I have to build, I have to do stuff in order to progress. Now, here we go. These are the cards. Now, this setup, there are a set of blue cards for the blue player. These are like seeded starting cards, and then there's an equivalent set of the same 5 actions for the yellow player. But all of the action cards, while they have a basic front end, so there are 5 copies of the A's, 5 of the B's, and so on, down to the E's, they do have slight variations in terms of what's on the other side. These are the alternative actions, the flip actions. I'll come back to those. So the actions will be familiar to you if you've played Snowdonia before. So on your turn, you take one of your cards and you'll simply do the action on it and then flip the card over. Okay, so the A action is take up to 3 things from the stockyard. Okay. If there aren't enough things, you restock back up to 6 and then take the remainder that you're due. This is take 4 pieces of rubble from a line, a single line, obviously going from the beginning to the end, and you keep the rubble. This is track laying. There's no steel bars in this. You simply pay the iron ore and it does the track for you. So you can do up to 3 actions again, a bit like in Snowdonia. So track laying and or converting rubble into stone. So that's what this basic C action does. The basic D action is complete a building space. So let's pay the resources on a building space, get the bonus, and possibly move your surveyor in there to do the action if you want to. Obviously you can't build in somewhere where there's still rubble. As soon as the rubble's gone though, you can build in there and or send your surveyor to that space. So even if the workers of the game finish a railway, you will always have access to that. The person who takes, by the way, if going back to the excavate action, the person who takes the last rubble out of space gets the victory point. So I'm using posh pennies, but obviously that would be a 1VP chit. For those who will get the final production copy in, we'll see what happens. I might actually try and do something special as a promo. I'll see how generous I feel. Lastly, it's the surveyor. So you simply move your surveyor. You just move him to any available space. That's a space where there's no rubble on, or a space that's been built. So that's fine. You can't send him to here, for instance. Or you could send him to a starting station. So in this case, you get an iron ore and you choose from the bag or the stockyard, and you get a green ticket if you haven't got one already. If you've already got one, then that's tough, but you'll need the tickets, as you'll see. Or you can send your surveyor to the pub, and this is where you get to score your cards. When you send your surveyor to the pub, you choose one of your action cards, you basically tuck it away to one side and you replace it from the available pool of cards that are left. There are one set of these cards, the A to E's, that are removed from the game at random, so not all the special ability alternative sides will be in the game that you might expect. You can't rely on certain ones being there. So you would have these to choose from. So if I cash an A, I can change into a different A, and it comes into play ready to use on its basic side. If there are no cards left in that letter, well, you don't get one, but then that may not matter because you might have scored something decent in order to do that. So those are the basic actions, but you'll notice on the bottom of my prototype we have an icon that shows you what kind of bonus this card gives you. So if this was scored, it gives you points for passengers in addition to normal passenger points, and it's got an alternative action on the other side. So as soon as I've taken my 3 things, I have to flip the card, and now you can see that it gives me half a point each for my passengers at the end of the game. And in order to flip this back over to the other side, I can spend 2 of any resource up to once to lay a piece of track. So if I want to do that, I can pay those resources on my next turn, lay the piece of track and flip it back over, and now I've got access to my stockyard actions again. It all seems very straightforward, of course, but you've got different abilities. So this one here scores you points for tickets at the end of the game, so that's up to 5 points, this card. And here it lets you build anywhere you like, that's allowed to be built in, but it costs you 2 extra rubble pieces on top of the cost of the building itself in order to flip it back to the basic side. This one scores you 1 point for every building space that you've completed at the end of the game, and it allows you to move your surveyor to an available station space on a line for which you have a ticket. So you can't just move it to any space, and you can't move it to the pub to score a card. You can only use this ability to move your surveyor to a place where you've got a ticket. So that's slightly restricted, but as soon as you do, you can flip it over. Now at the moment that looks quite restrictive because you're going to be flipping these cards over, then you're going to be kind of getting a little bit stuck and kind of being forced to do bits that you may not want to. Well, generally speaking, you want to try and avoid that. That's part of the game, is managing how your cards are laid out. But some of these cards have got abilities that allow you to flip other cards. So this one, for instance, is you can build a station space for which you have a ticket and have built at least one rail. So that's quite a restrictive one, but when you do it, you can also flip any other card as well as this one. So you can start flipping cards over and flipping other cards simultaneously. There's probably a nicer one here I can show you. Get my elbow out of the way of the thing. Right, okay, so this one here scores you 1 point each for building spaces. And then you can either lay a track, or you can convert blah, 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 and you get to flip a card as well. So that's quite a nice one. So if you score your A card, you might want to pick up this A card because it allows you to get your resources with its basic action, but also it's quite a nifty and easy to double flip cards using the other side. Building railways should be something that you aim for. So that's the heart of the game. That's the mechanic that really whets my appetite, certainly, and makes the game quite tense and interesting. You do have to watch what your opponent's doing, what abilities they've got. Can they build in the space that you want to build in on their next action? Or have they got themselves into a bit of a bottleneck and they can't actually get something flipped in time? Do you have a round to get yourself ready? The game ends when all but one or all of these stations at the end of each line have had their railway built in them. So as soon as the railway's laid in all of these, and that includes the ones that are done by the game, then the game ends and you do your scoring. And on the back of my prototype, I've got a handy little guide. So you get a point for every railway anyway. You get half a point for every passenger anyway, but you can score additional points based on those. There are line bonuses. So looking down here at Blaenau Festiniog and the Welsh Highland Railway, the person who's built the most things on the Festiniog line gets 3 extra points, and that's basically who's got the most cubes. If there's a tie, then nobody gets them. Then you score for your bonus points on